Hello, I'm Dan Hamilton, the host of the Next Gen Warrior podcast. As always, the Next Gen Warrior podcast is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush of the Texas Veterans Land Board. It is an honor to be here today with John Boerstler, the CEO of Combined Arms. We have a great opportunity, John, to talk about your leadership at Combined Arms. But before we get there and before we get into the veterans community in Houston and across this great state of Texas, tell the audience a little bit about your military experience and then how you came to be the CEO of Combined Arms.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it. And we just saw Commissioner Bush and Chairman Bush, and thanked him as well. But I owe him a challenge coin now, so I gotta come back.
You'll get him back next time, right?
So thanks again for having me. But yeah, like you, I joined the Marine Corps as a young man or younger man, and found my way inevitably back to Texas after growing up in Southwest Houston, and went to college at Texas A&M, which I know is a friction point already. But
got a couple
positive
around
one
here.
Yeah. It's not like you went to LSU or anything.
Yeah, there you go.
No, but and then went to college. I was going for two jobs, one in Brussels and one in DC. Got the DC job, or the job for the U.S. House. Did that. Really learned the gaps in veteran services, military transition, the whole gamut. Because of being the only veteran in the office, they're like, "You're doing all this stuff." I didn't mean to knife him. It just came out.
That's
that
all
way.
right. It's just natural.
I
know.
And so I really learned about all the gaps in the system. This is 2007, 2008 when the Walter Reed scandals were happening, and really the members of Congress that we worked with really wanted to put an emphasis on making sure that locally here in Texas this was never to happen again. And so I came back home and worked for the mayor of Houston's office, who we were bringing together a broad-based coalition with the county judge and the mayor of Houston to really make Houston, greater Houston area, the best place for veterans, because we found out we're the second largest population. Then did a couple of jobs, worked in a couple of roles at Wounded Warrior Project, and we started an organization called the Lone Star Veterans Association, which became the largest network of post 9/11 veterans in the state. And then that kind of led inevitably to us forming the Combined Arms System, which is really a backbone organization mixed in with a coalition of organization mixed in with a Better Business Bureau mixed in with an Economic Development Corporation for the greater Houston region, and now expanding beyond that, of course, which we'll probably talk about here in a minute. And just couldn't be prouder of what we've accomplished in the last 12 years since I got out of the Marine Corps and Texas A&M and came home.
So before we get into your specific role and talk a little bit more about what Combined Arms is for the audience who may be unfamiliar with your organization, can you tell me the difference between you leaving the service and then looking for a job that had to do with veterans issues versus just having an opportunity and then exploiting the opportunity that was given to you? Were you looking for a job like that?
No, not at all. I didn't even know that this was a sector or an industry, really. I had no idea. I didn't have VA benefits at the time. I used some of my GI Bill, of course, the education benefits to go to school, but I had no idea that this apparatus of society ever existed. And being, like I said, as the only veteran in a congressman's office, they're like, you're gonna learn the DOD.
They gave you the responsibilities for it.
Absolutely. Right. And then from there, I got to know everybody in the community, and I kind of created this whole. I really pigeonholed myself in a career, essentially, is what I've done. But no, I really got it opened me up to this whole world of gaps in services and how we as a generation and as leaders can help fill them in innovative and useful ways.
So all of your experience, you start out as a Marine, then you see the bureaucratic experience in the House of Representatives, and now you're leading Combined Arms. What exactly, is Combined Arms, and what are the services that it provides?
So Combined Arms really provides four. Like we're Marines, we can only count to four on a good day.
After that, it's really this gets real fuzzy.
It's like, oh man. So I think I could get to five. So we run a co-working space, which is critically important. We're centrally located, easy to access, right along the rail line. We've got free parking, which is unheard of in East Downtown. But the co-working space and the intention there is for all of the government agencies, including the Veteran Land Board and GLO, Texas Veterans Commission, Texas Workforce Commission, and a host of national, regional, and local nonprofits, can really work together and collaborate more effectively, which essentially reduces programmatic redundancies, reduces overhead in the community, but really creates these intentional collisions that now that we're running into each other, getting coffee or at the water cooler, we're kind of figuring out ways to collaborate on events and funding and grant opportunities together. Secondarily, but it also serves as a single point of entry for transitioning service members, veterans, and their families. So instead of going to 50 or 100 different places, you're coming to one. Secondarily, we developed an integrated technology platform, which essentially overlays the services that veterans are seeking and connects them to the agencies that provides those services, and then holds the agency accountable for how quickly and effectively they serve them. So if they don't get back, the agency doesn't get back to the veteran in 96 hours, then we hold them publicly accountable. Yes. Absolutely. We also we run a marketing campaign. We're really trying to attract more veterans to Texas as a means of economic and social development, because we want more military talent in Texas, as you know, and as you probably talked about on the podcast. We're the fastest growing veteran population in the country. We will be
here
the largest.
Here in the state of Texas?
Yes, and we will be the largest population in a couple of years when we overtake California finally.
Can I pause you real
Absolutely.
quick? Is that because veterans are coming here from other states, or is that because the enlistment rates in Texas are so high and then people return home?
I think it's a combination of those two things, and the fact that a lot of folks, when they come here and they're stationed here at Fort Hood or Fort Sam or Fort Bliss or Corpus Christi Naval Air Station, what have you, they're wanting to stay in Texas, even if they're not from here, because it's such a great state for veterans and our families. I mean, despite the weather, we're probably the best state in the world for veterans. So we're wanting to attract more veterans and their families, more military talent to the great state of Texas as a means of economic and social development, because no one else is.
So now you've kind of for the audience, you've provided the context that Combined Arms is essentially trying to take all the assets, all the organizations, like whether you said that's business development, university, if that's healthcare, and you are kind of an umbrella organization or at least a funnel to set them up with those different organizations. Outside of, or maybe more so, what you see on an everyday basis is really kind of the cream of the crop of why a veteran should be here, because you see the organizations and the agencies that are taking care of veterans. Outside of that, why are some of the reasons that a veteran, if they're stationed here in Fort Hood or Corpus Christi Air Station, like you were saying, or at BAMC down in San Antonio, and they're listening to this podcast, they're still on active duty or in the reserves, and they say, I can go back to Ohio, I can go back to New York, I can go to Kentucky, or I can stay in Texas. The reason you want them to stay in Texas is what?
I mean, obviously, I think that them and their families will thrive here because of the desire for our employers to hire veterans, the desire for our employers to train and retain veterans, the desire for our communities to want them to be a part of civic groups we were talking about earlier at the neighborhood level. Texas really views veterans as civic assets, not civic deficits, and I think that no other state really does that, and that's illustrated in the benefits that we receive as well from the state agencies that's above and beyond what the federal government provides.
I think something that I really learned by just talking to you about the organization is I think you kind of switched the onus from the veteran, which is finite in resources and energy and time and what we can understand, to the community, which is infinite, because they're in every single industry, they're in every single sector, they have so much more experience. Can you talk about how you came to that realization, or how Combined Arms came to the realization to say, we need to use the initiative from the community side to reach out to the veteran, not the veteran having to reach out to, like you said, 250 different organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest challenges that veterans report on all the needs assessments that we've done in Houston, Austin, El Paso, et cetera, the number one challenge that they report is that the system of resources and information is far too vast and far too challenging to navigate successfully. And on the other side, when you ask the organizations, they say that their biggest challenge is, I don't know what the organization on my left and the organization on my right does and how to properly refer and collaborate with them. So Combined Arms essentially solves for both problems. And by becoming a backbone organization as opposed to an umbrella organization, we really triage those resources so that less veterans fall through the cracks and hold those agencies more accountable. But we're doing so by flipping the entire social service delivery dynamic on its head, holding the agencies accountable for how quickly and effectively they respond to veterans, as opposed to the traditional method, which is what you were referring to, is where veterans, it's really the onus is on them, and they get frustrated, they get tired, they get worn out, and fed up on trying to figure it out. Yeah. Absolutely, to trying to Google everything all day. We try to take the luck out of it to make sure that they have better access to everything they need.
Talk to me specifically about the veteran population in Houston. Can you diagnose what has been working there?
So obviously the last 12 years we've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm the first to admit that. And I still write them all down. It's pretty long list.
You document the mistakes that you made as a leader or as a community?
Both I made as a leader and the entire community made. So what we learned early on, we just kept creating different programs to address the different solutions. It was almost like putting a Band-Aid over an issue. And we finally realized, instead of creating new programs to address every issue, we need to create a system of programs to allow the best-in-class programs to then serve the population. Absolutely, and to be able to refer bilaterally between the agencies so that veterans wouldn't fall through the cracks and that they would be held more accountable. I think what's worked in Houston is that we already had a good culture of people working together and knowing who is who. I think the overlay of what Combined Arms as a backbone organization or a chamber of commerce or whatever you want to call it, is being able to really pull people together in a formal versus in an informal way. Because previously we were very informal, like most communities in Texas are, where we know who each other are, and we may refer to each other once in a while, but it's not very effective, and there's certainly no follow through. Now that's built into the process to where we raise that level of accountability and change the behavior over the entire landscape of veteran organizations. And a good data point on that, because you have to always kind of try and back up things with data whenever you can, is that in May of 2017, our average response time and the number of hours it took the average agency to respond to a veteran inquiry was about 160 hours. May of 2018, a year later, was about 56 hours. Now today it's below 40 hours. So it just shows you that the change in behavior over time, that now veteran organizations are delivering those services in a faster, more effective way.
The second question I have for you regarding the population specifically in Houston, which you're so entwined in and that you are from, is what areas would you like to see improvement in?
Yeah, I think that we could do a much better job at integrating most other government services that are not specifically related to veterans. There's a host of other human services, because at the end of the day, we're still humans, sort of. Yes, Marines, I don't know if we're humans. That's
debatable.
Yeah, very debatable. I haven't seen the evidence yet, but we're still working on it.
No data points on that.
They're still working on it. But I think that that opening up the human services verticals of these institutional, non-governmental, and nonprofit organizations, the institutional state and federal agencies that are delivering or that have been delivering social services to everybody in the community for decades and decades. I think that bringing them into our system, because at the end of the day, the veterans have the same the same challenges that most other humans do when we're displaced workers. Because the biggest problem that we have in the military community is that we are displaced workers. The Defense Department, as the largest employer in the world, creates the largest number of displaced workers in the world every year, 250,000. So we're coming from California or Missouri or Virginia, and we're coming back to Texas, and we don't have those professional and personal networks that we need to plug in and accelerate our transition into civilian life. So this really acts as that accelerator in making sure that we don't fall through the cracks.
That's interesting. I want to switch kind of your perspective on this then, because we've talked about the veterans community, we've talked a little bit about the business community, but I'm interested in your growth as a CEO and your growth as a leader. Just going from being in the Marine Corps to running an organization that touches almost every single arena, of business or nonprofit and government. How do you, because your role as a CEO demands so much attention in those diverse arenas, how do you personally manage and delegate what you put your time and attention into?
Wow, it's a really good question, and I would say that I do it very intentionally, but I don't. I wish
you tried to. You set out for that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a good question because it's probably something that a lot of people are like, oh man, that guy's got it figured out. Well, not really. I'm still figuring
learning it out.
On the fly. But I think you always have to have, if you don't have a good team, if you don't have a good support system, whether you have a governing board or great bosses or great folks that you're supervising, then you can't go out and change the world. That's for sure. For starters, and then once you build that great team, then you're able to really spin the flywheel and then get investors and get the community to change and behavior and everything like that. I think that how I've been very fortunate to pursue a couple of different leadership development programs. I mean, everyone can read a book about
university
leadership.
Courses or more structural, or
actually some more
just having mentors,
more international in scope. So I did a Marshall Fellowship, which was really cool. I got to go and study the European models for 4 weeks, which is not a bad deal whatsoever.
Sounds pretty amazing.
It's awesome. And I did that when I was at the mayor's office. I'm doing an Eisenhower Fellowship now, where I'm studying the Israeli model. I'm studying the French model because we don't have it all figured out. I mean, we're probably one of the best in the world at what we do in terms of veteran services, but there's still so many gaps in what we do that we might be able to learn from some of our best allies. And so I think that just opening yourself up, the best recommendation I can give to anyone that's pursuing a career in leadership or management is opening yourself up to different opportunities like that, to step outside of your day-to-day, challenge yourself, meet different people that speak different language and eat different food. I mean, we all did that in the military.
Sure.
Why not do that now in the civilian world and really challenge yourself to get outside just the veteran bubble?
Do you have a mentor?
I've got a bunch of mentors that are incredible human beings, both male and female, that have really helped drive my career.
Did you seek them out, or was it something that they were kind of in your circle, or if there's an audience member listening, whether they're a veteran or they're not a veteran, and they're like, I want to grow professionally or I want to grow personally.
Yeah.
What was your experience like finding a mentor?
I think it's a little bit of seeking out, but it's also in a little bit of happenstance and some mild harassment over time. Just making sure
keeping up with them.
Yeah, and you're just I think everybody who is more senior to you, or even if they're not more senior to you, that they have been more successful, or in your eyes been more successful. Sure. Nobody will ever pass up giving someone advice. No one will ever pass up getting coffee and fielding advice. And if they do, then you don't want it.
You don't want them to be a mentor.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've been very fortunate to meet some incredible human beings along the way, and hopefully I can be that same type of mentor to someone else.
I'm kind of interested because I think you as a mentor. I kind of want to go back to the concept that you were building your network of veterans organizations, or you were trying to come up with programs, and you wrote down the mistakes that you made. And if you were to mentor a young veteran, male or female, how would you talk to them about overcoming those mistakes? Why did you write yours down? And then what was the personal characteristics that you had to employ to get over those mistakes?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, I got so in the weeds with writing down my mistakes. I actually pursued a master's program at night and then wrote my entire capstone thesis on what is now Combined Arms. And that was 7 years ago. So it's taken that long since to really figure it out and get it right. But in terms of how to pursue that and how to really sort yourself out, I think it's just, once again, kind of going back to being open to new ideas and new lines of thought, and going out and looking at other backbone organizations like the Coalition of the Homeless or the Houston Food Bank, one of the best organizations for the food insecurity space. I mean, there's so many different lessons learned, that instead of reinventing the wheel, I'm just going to go borrow it from someone else and then improve upon it. And so I think just kind of being open-minded and seeking out those leaders and asking to get coffee and get advice, because they're always willing to give it.
But you didn't get frustrated with the mistakes that you had made, even when you were writing them down and you were looking at them?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm still frustrated by the mistakes we make all the time. I mean, I think that's constantly living in the world of being a leader, and
Right.
that's constantly living in a world of being in an imperfect system. But you can't let that defeat you. You can't let that just drag you down so that you don't have any possible recourse. And if you do, then maybe it is time to do something different. But complacency kills, right? I mean, if you start getting into that comfortable cycle where you're not challenging yourself, you're not challenging your team, you're not challenging the status quo and challenging the system itself, then you should probably think about doing something different.
Yeah. How would you define a successful veteran transition, and would you say there's a blueprint?
Successful veteran transition is probably due in large part to the Lance Corporal Underground, or what the Army would call the E4 Mafia, that word of mouth, your buddy system, like one buddy figures it out and then they all just go and do what that dude did, or that guy or girl did. Like it's that's still, I think, a significant piece of that.
Like joint experiences almost?
Yeah, I mean, because you're gonna, I think it just like, no one gets it right the first time, right? I think being willing to make mistakes and learn over time, because none of us know exactly what we want to do, especially if you come from a certain military occupational specialty or job that has no direct translation into the civilian world, no direct application. We're all still struggling kind of to figure out what skills and experience we bring, even though they're numerous, and how to translate that and make it consumable for civilian employers and et cetera. But I think just making sure that you're challenging yourself, you're willing to make those mistakes, you're willing to learn from those mistakes and ask for help. I mean, I think that's what the right transition experience looks for.
So that's one of the most crucial things that we try to tell the audience here is that when you leave the service, or even if you were never a veteran, at some point you're going to hit a difficult patch in your personal or professional life, and that shouldn't dissuade you or discouraging you from continuing your transition out of the military.
Definitely.
And I think, for Combined Arms, what you guys do so well is you envelop the veteran with the resources that they need.
Right.
And I think maybe one of the most, you can hone in on a trait that it prevents transition, and I think that's isolation, right? If you have a veteran who is on their own and they won't seek help, or they won't come get the resources that Combined Arms can provide, then you're really going to prevent yourself, I think, from that growth. But if you find yourself within a community, especially the veterans community, that's a place where you can grow, you can find mentors, you can learn from. I know the mistakes that I made, just kind of growing up after leaving the service and kind of understanding what it is to be an individual outside of my unit or outside of my platoon. But once you kind of find your feet and you kind of find your passion and you can really kind of grow, become a leader, and also serve in your community. It's something that I know we're really passionate about here, and I know you've also been equally involved with in many different levels in the veterans community. Would you say that there is a trait maybe in veterans who are struggling to succeed or struggling to adapt that they can maybe identify and then try to steer away from?
Yeah, I think that isolation is one of the biggest determinants of that, right? Not reaching out to friends and family, or not engaging in trying to better yourself through employment or education, or not getting involved socially or in the community or volunteering or anything like that. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why, to continue to engage those folks that are still in transition and to potentially at risk or vulnerable in any way. But yeah, I mean, I think that making sure that using that Lance Corporal Underground or the E4 Mafia, that buddy system, once again, we have to. We have to watch out for that and make sure that alert people that that work in the system that we've built to go out and engage those individuals so that they have an opportunity to correct their course and get and make, even though they've made those mistakes. Based on what the data says, we see demographic shifts along the trend lines of everything that we collect. We're currently the largest real-time survey of veteran needs and demographics in the state of Texas right now. And so we can show you exactly who struggles the most with what. I would say that folks that are probably 100% service connected, disabled, that aren't working, that aren't in school, that aren't accessing community or social activities, those are probably the most at risk, and those are the ones that we see as the data line goes that are accessing mental health and peer support services, and even may fall into different behaviors that could exacerbate those issues.
Yeah. So for a veteran in the Houston area, or for somebody who's on active duty who is going to be transitioning out of the military soon, how can they get a hold of your services, and where can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, combinedarms.us is our website. They can go on there, they can create a profile, take a needs assessment. If they go on and they start taking a needs assessment or creating a profile, our team will reach out, because we don't want anyone to fall through the cracks, so we get alerts for that. But also connect with us online and on Facebook. Our Instagram handle is @CombinedArmsTX. I believe, but those are the best ways to engage us. We're at 2929 McKinney Street in East Downtown, right by the soccer stadium in Houston. We'll hopefully be here with the City of Austin when we develop the Veteran Resource Center, which is why I'm here in the great city of Austin today, and El Paso very soon as well.
Awesome. So you guys you're obviously growing. You have a tremendous presence in the Houston area. I want to thank you for all of your hard work. I think the conversation that we had today, just about being, finding an opportunity. I think the conversation at the very beginning where you said I was in the House of Representatives and they wanted me to take on veterans issues, and just making the best out of that can just be replicated by so many veterans and people who have served or who have not served. I appreciate you sharing your time, your energy with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you again for watching another episode of the Next Gen Warrior podcast. As always, it is a pleasure to be at this table. If you are a veteran here in the great state of Texas, we encourage you to reach out to resources at Combined Arms or in a community center. Get involved, lead, serve in any capacity in any industry. Your community needs you and it wants you. Thank you for serving. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Follow us on Instagram @Voices of Vets, on Twitter @Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.